You've just won $250 million and it's been deposited in your bank account. What are you going to do today? Looks like someone's not living with roommates anymore. Reread that Reddit post about winning the lottery. Sleep. Do a mass family group text asking them for money. This will buy me valuable time before anyone catches wind and comes running for money. Pay off all my debt, go to a nice restaurant and have a nice meal. Check my balance about 100 times. Overpay my credit card so that those bitches can finally owe me money, son. Find an accountant I trust. And a lawyer. Get another bank account because it's only FDIC insured up to $250,000. Disappear. Wait for it to clear. Sleep. I would sleep so long and so peacefully. Then I'd tackle business. Moonwalk out of my job and spend the entire day making sure every cent of any possible debt I have is paid off. Letting my dad know all his shit is paid off too, and we're taking an extended vacation next summer, so start planning. Edit. And just to put it out there, I wouldn't stop working, but my work would become something much more enjoyable. Kayak tours into the swamps and stuff. Quit my job and start browsing Zillow. Book a hip replacement surgery for my mom so she can enjoy walking/traveling again. If you had the power to shut down a company for good, which company would it be? United Healthcare. As someone who has worked in healthcare for 12 years, I can say with confidence that they're the most evil health insurance company of them all. They once walked into a hospital I worked for and told them that they have to cut their discharges to nursing homes by 50% with no clinical justification offered whatsoever. Just make the number happen or you don't meet the terms of your contract. Yes, that means sending old people home to die, but we laughed at UHC afterwards and changed nothing. The people they send to these meetings always look like cartoon villains that should have a Persian cat in their lap. Other health insurance companies are evil, too, but UHC is the worst by a very large margin. They lean into the evil. Edit. If you are here to shill for UHC, save the keystrokes. I don't want to hear it. I've been through hell with UHC both personally and professionally, and there is absolutely nothing you could possibly say to change my mind. Damn health insurance companies. Geez, do I have to choose just one? Companies hiring poor people to scam other poor people. Scammers. Scientology. Church my ass, it's a corporation that murders its employees if they try to escape. Burn it to the ground. Herbalife. Ticketmaster/Live Nation. The Church of Scientology. Shine. Susan G. Komen for the Cure. Nestle. Nestle is a good choice, but it would sure be nice to see Facebook wither away to nothing. Wells Fargo. John Deere right now with the tractor software bullshit stopping farmers fixing their equipment. If I need, I harvest today before rain. I don't have time for an service appointment. Vadim's tire shop next door. Fuck you and your lower prices, Vadim. Edit. Thanks for the award, comrades. Redditors with an ex who threatened to kill themselves over a breakup. How did that turn out? My sister's ex-BF tried to kill himself by swallowing pills. It was vitamin C. Sad guy but great skin. Was with a girl once, and we were on the rocks for a while, break up then get back together, and it got quite toxic. So one day I decided that was it and called it quits. I used to work retail and she knew my shifts and she popped up to my work to buy essential even though my workplace was 20 miles further from her closet shops. I served her politely then kept it civil, which for her was a shock as I would usually give in and we would confess our love and get back together. So once that happened, she left the store and back then we weren't allowed mobile phone on shift, so she blew up my phone, messages and calls and saying stuff like how I embarrassed her, etc. I got off the shift and looked at my phone and ignored her messages, and a couple of hours later when I was home finally decided to pick up one of her calls to tell her to leave me alone. She told me she was in hospital and she attempted to take her life. I was shocked and asked which hospital and if I could come. She said no. I kept pressing for details and she would avoid and try to getting back together. I was like 90% sure she was faking it. I told her I would be there for her as a friend, but I won't be getting back with her for the sake of my health and sanity. I hung up on her and called her friends and told them what had happened. They were shocked and started calling her, etc. The next day I got confirmation that she had faked it all, and that was the moment I knew I made the right choice. After he backed me into a corner with a big knife and threatened to stab himself to make me happy, then why was I the one in the corner? My dude. I videoed the rest of his destructive meltdown, punching walls, throwing dishes across the house, screaming threats at me, and sent it to my mom. Then I told him she had it and he was going to let me leave and sign the divorce papers, or she would send it to his chain of command and get him dishonorably discharged. Now that I know more about domestic violence, I do not recommend that direct kind of confrontation. I was very lucky it worked. Back in the 90s. Broke up with her for a lot of reasons. She had lied to me about a lot of things, manipulated, got caught, crossed lines I told her not to cross, so I told her we were over. I was 18. She was 23. She threatened to kill herself. Neighbor found her in her garage sitting in a car that was running. Got a call, got there as the ambulance was pulling up. Went to the hospital, she was going to be fine. Her family treated me like I was the one at fault. I told her goodbye, told her she needed to get help, and left. Never saw her again. Got a letter like 6 months later, but I just threw it away. This was about 6 months after my dad had killed himself because he found out he had terminal colon cancer, got drunk, he was an alcoholic, gambling addict, ruined his life, and shot himself using the pistol my mom bought him for Christmas a few years earlier. He was a cop. So I had no tolerance for this sort of emotional manipulation. She had her family, and I knew they would take care of her. I stayed somewhat firm but didn't kick her out immediately. After she realized it wasn't going to change my mind, she threatened again, and after a lot of things, having to hold her back, take all potentially dangerous objects away from her, break into my own bathroom to get the razors away from her, etc. etc., she eventually ran to the balcony and pretended to choke herself unconscious. Thankfully my roommate picked up on this and how distraught and completely unable to process the situation I was at the time, and pulled me aside, said she was okay. Then told me to leave the apartment to go outside and call 911 for her. They showed up, immediately recognized she was taking and started barking orders at her, took her in, had her admitted with affidavits signed by my roommate and myself. She came back to the apartment after and only a few hours in, deciding to keep trying to make things happen with me. I had to continue to tell her no, and tell her parents to come get her so I wouldn't be forced to get law enforcement involved. They finally understood. A week or two before this I gave the same ultimatum and they told me to call the cops. I was pretty guilt-ridden about the whole thing. I hate seeing people hurting. She finally got picked up and left. I ignored all her calls and texts and then one day she managed to call me from some other phone, roughly a month or two after all this. She asked me how we're going to get through all this and the distance as a couple. I had to reiterate again we weren't together. Very clearly. For about a half hour. Like 6 years later she reached out to me and apologized and wanted to say she's sorry for everything and that she's finally received appropriate help and all that jazz. I forgave her, but haven't really talked to her at all since. She seems to be happily engaged to some other dude in another city now and Jay wish nothing but the best for her. He tried to kill me instead and is now sitting in prison. My sister's boyfriend killed himself with her on the phone. Fucked her up for a while. I was 18 and in an emotional, verbal, mentally abusive relationship. My ex would threaten suicide. We all knew he was only saying that to manipulate me, every time I wanted to leave or didn't do what he wanted. I had enough one day and told him to go ahead to do it. He was obviously shocked cause I hung up and blocked him. His mom ended up calling me begging me to unblock him because he will do something bad. I told her it wasn't my problem and hung up and blocked her too. He ended up stalking me so I filed a restraining order against him. He always thought he had full control over me so he was definitely shocked when I cut him out the way I did. I had an ex that was schizophrenic who threatened suicide if I ever left her. When I left her, I did so by phone when she was staying down at her parents' house. While I hated to do it that way, that felt like the only way I could guarantee she wouldn't do anything they'd watch her too close. Seems to have worked last I heard, she was happily married and had moved to California. However, there's a bit more to the story. That night, each of her parents called and left me an angry message. Her mom was understandably upset and tried to guilt me about it. Her dad on the other hand left me drunken death threats, saying things like you're a marked man and count your lucky stars I haven't caught up to you yet. I took out a permanent restraining order after that. Related side note, did you know permanent restraining orders aren't actually permanent and can be overturned without the party who got the RO knowing about it? Another story for another time, I suppose. My daughter dated a guy at the first part of this year. She didn't love him, but he was very much in love with her. They broke up and stayed friends. He would still come by her work and talk to her and spend a lot of time there, and she was nice and friendly to him, didn't rub it in his face when she started dating other people a month after they'd broken up, basically pretty good friends. One day, about a week before she graduated high school, he told her again that he loved her and was going to kill himself if she wouldn't be with him. She, and I'm proud of how she handled it like an adult despite being 18, told him that she cared for him and she'd always be there for him, but she didn't want a relationship with him more than friends. She wasn't dating anyone else at the time, and she had to explain that just because she wasn't with anyone else, that doesn't mean she's needing a relationship so bad that she'll date him just to keep from being alone. She explained that would be leading him on, and she'd never want to do that. Well, he went home and killed himself. He left a note saying it's because she wouldn't be with him and he didn't want to live without her. Super small town in the rural south, so all of his friends and family blamed her. Detectives showed up at her school during exams and pulled her out to talk to her. She showed them all of their correspondence. They also said she'd been very adult and handled it in the best way she could have to be nice to the guy. One night, right after the graduation, we went to the local McDonald's. He had some friends that worked there and they kept giving her the stink eye, and she eventually went up to them and explained that she can't give her life for his and that she shouldn't be expected to be unhappy for anyone, and she showed them exactly what she'd texted and how she wasn't trying to hurt him, and after that they were all cool. It's really taken a toll on her, she still feels horrible about it and his mom still kinda makes offhand comments like it's her fault. She's handled it as good as I could have hoped anyone would have, but nobody should have to go through that, especially at her age. And that poor boy, thinking the only way out was to die over not being in a relationship with her. Sad all around. My ex was pretty unstable. When it was clear that our relationship was dying, she kept threatening suicide if I left her. The night I broke up with her, she grabbed my car keys and tried to run out the door, saying that she was going to drive my car off this big bridge down the road. I bear hug restrained her until I could grab the keys out of her hand. Once I let her go, she started hitting me and threw a glass lamp at my head. She just would not stop attacking me to get to my car keys. It devolved into me pinning her to the floor and just sort of laying on top of her while she punched, bit, and scratched me. I called 911. By the time the police arrived, she'd tired herself out and we were both covered in my blood. I was pretty sure I was about to be arrested for domestic violence, but thankfully she was stupid or unstable enough to tell them the truth, plus it helped that I was the only one with any injuries. I explained her suicide threats. They took her to the psych ward for 72 hours, and I spent the rest of the night cleaning blood out of the carpet. I packed my shit and disappeared by the time she got out. It was her name on the lease, so I just crashed with some friends until I could get my own place. The last time we spoke, she was mad at me for getting her sent to the hospital. In her words, I should have known she wasn't actually going to do it. Glad she could at least admit that it was all to manipulate me. Last I heard, she's still alive and crazy many years later. When she threatened to kill herself, I called her bluff and called the cops. She wasn't serious about killing herself, but she still got sectioned. I've never seen her again after that day. Well, we didn't break up, but she did actually kill herself. It sucks, we weren't even married yet. We just got name tattoos, I know, and she just kinda went paranoid for a few weeks, kept thinking I was unfaithful. I was never. They took her to the psych ward one night, she convinced them she was fine. They released her, she went home, left me a will, and a suicide note and killed herself. She is alive. She told me she was going to kill herself after I found out she was cheating on me. Fun times.